Well, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm definitely working on some more videos that are going to cover general worldview stuff, and I think go into deeper depth, like longer videos essentially that cover related multiple topics, because I think there's just a little bit too much need to go into detail for the kind of soundbitey thing that has tended to happen. On the other hand, I thought we could have fun today. Hopefully, a video that'll do well with the algorithm, trigger the cons for sure, as it were, because I do tend to do that with my videos. So we're having fun here. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about why conservative politics is filled with projection. So projection is the psychological concept where you sort of lob an attack at somebody else. But it's actually something that you're insecure about yourself, and that's kind of part of the reason for the vitriol. So y basically, it's not like, and I do want to caveat, it's not like even leftists can't be uh, like this as well. What it really comes down to is whether it's reactionary politics. Because when you're doing reactionary politics, you're just reacting. Stuff comes up, and then you have to dispute it. And so there ends up being a lot more of this type of um, projection, shifting blame away, because for every claim that kind of comes up, the reactionary is going to have their counterclaim. And leftist politics, even if you believe it's rooted in ideology, is still at least about proposing specific things and not just reacting to people who want to try to change the status quo in any way, which is where conservatives today pretty much are. And so you can substitute reactionary for conservative if if it helps you not get butthurt about this. The point of this video is just to get better at recognizing this concept out in the real world, that basically every accusation is a confession. It honestly kind of gets old after a while to hear sometimes whatever the new thing that, conservative reactionary, pundits and people want to start saying, because it's just like, once you notice this, it's seriously everywhere. But like, gentle reminder, we are just having fun here. I'm not obviously doing anything that really impacts things in the world with this video. We're just going over some ideas. All right. So here's the first projection. You might hear, they force their sexuality on everyone. So you're going to hear conservatives say that, like, oh, a gay character in a movie is them forcing their sexuality, that gay people presenting themselves out in public together on dates is them forcing their sexuality, that saying that you're gay or trans because it relates to sex inherently means that just being that way means you're forcing your sexuality. But okay, why is this projection? Because normally, normal culture, like the culture we have become accustomed to, is one that forces heteronormative sexuality on everybody. Yes, that's true. We are all expected to conform to the heteronormative. Um, and the whole point of being gay is that you can just be gay. But when two straight people kiss, it's not like they're being criticized for, like, oh, you're displaying sexuality in front of everybody. So it's a double standard, and it is projection because of their own fears about trying to force their ideas of sexuality on everybody. All right, the next one. They're overly idealistic. This is something that you hear all the time. Oh my goodness, leftists, they're just idealistic. They don't understand the real world. And to be honest, this might actually be the one that's the most flipped on its head once I tell you what, in the study of philosophy, idealism actually means. Because it actually, both the words idealism and the word materialism are completely inverted from their philosophical meanings in mainstream discourse. I'll tell you what I mean. So, we usually think of idealism as referring to like optimism, or maybe like um yeah, some sort of like, you're overly optimistic about the world if you're idealistic. Okay, but in philosophy, idealism refers to the idea that ideas form the basis of reality. All right, this is an unrelated concept, basically. In philosophical idealism, it is from the idea from which reality emerges. So, an example of this is in Christianity. A belief in Jesus is the idea that alone changes things in the world. Now, what you could do is you could have a material analysis of the world. Now, this is another word that gets misused by religion. Religion likes to say materialistic to mean just rooted in uh, things that are like destructive to your soul or whatever, because they believe in this sort of dualism of spirit and the physical world. Now, the problem with this is that, again, the philosophical definition of materialism varies greatly from this. And in philosophy, materialism refers to the idea that the material world creates everything. So, idealism and materialism are basically opposites of each other, but they're also treated as opposites of what they are in the normal discourse. And the irony of calling um, what leftists might believe ideology, when leftism, Marxism, is specifically rooted in materialism, a form of materialism called dialectical materialism or historical materialism. Leftists are specifically concerned with the actual things that everyday people face, the actual systems at play out in the world. Yes, there's an ideology that forms from analyzing those things, but it comes from analyzing those things. By contrast, conservatives who are trying to uphold a system that exists not because of logic, but simply because it's the sort of descendant of previous lines of forms of power, well, they're ideologues. They have to hold on to the idea that doesn't have to be rooted anywhere. Wealth is an idea. Success is an idea. And even just the thought that an individual person alone is going to change things in a society where everyone is contributing to any change, and anything involving lots of people involves lots of people. But no, the idea of the individual is from where we try to divine those in terms of the reactionary conservative politics. So I went on a little long about this one, but I knew that I was going to, because this is seriously the biggest projection of them all. I freaking swear to God. All right. This one is one you hear all the time. They're obsessed with identity politics. Whoa, like me in my last video, it's like, oh, you're bringing up race. All right. Now, nobody in the comments who tried to call me racist because I had addressed a video specifically to young white men, none of them were able to come up with a response when I pointed out that they're not critiquing me for being ageist or sexist. I said young. I said man. White is a demographic. There were 3 demographics, the cross-section of which I was speaking to in that video. But, sure, you've trained yourself, oh, anyone who brings up race is an actual Sigma racist, and you thought that was a gotcha. So why is this projection? Because conservatives are obsessed with identity. They literally, you can see in the policies, when they say immigrants, they literally don't care if it's an immigrant from a white country. They literally are being racist when they say immigrants, because nobody cares about the immigrants like Hugh Jackman or Justin Bieber or any of these rich white people. No, that was never the issue. Immigrant becomes a code word for racism. Conservatives are obsessed with identity because the system that we have is one that, like it or not, was built on the backs of entire other races of people, which aren't a real thing in science, were invented by the Atlantic slave trade, this is true, in order to reinforce the colonial system of oppression. Before there was all of this migration colonialism around, people were enemies with their nearby, like, neighbors, let alone nearby countries, which were barely even a concept back then, in the same way that we know today. No, people, did not have this skin color idea of what makes somebody a different class, because everybody in the country, it was based on whatever the system of that time was. However, when you are mass transporting Africans, when you're trying to mass enslave or kill indigenous Americans, when you're encouraging Asian people to come and you put them to work building railroads, building all this stuff, and then push them aside once all that stuff's built so that white settlers can come and like start using the land, Yeah, it's a culture that's obsessed with identities because it is on that basis that some groups have been preferred over others. But it's not a zero sum game. The world is not intrinsically a zero sum game. It only is under the system of capitalism that we have set up. Humankind before the Neolithic revolutions that locked away the food because we started producing agricultural surplus, were largely egalitarian. So what we see in left-leaning politics in the modern day is, I think, on a very large timescale, regression to the mean. Human beings are meant to live in a sustainable way with nature. Duh, because otherwise things that don't live sustainably die. All right. So the next one, they put feelings over facts. All right. So the way you usually hear it is from Ben Shapiro saying, uh, facts don't care about your feelings. But man, if there's not a group that has more feelings than the fucking MAGA right, I don't know what to tell you, dude. They're the bunch of biggest crybabies. They don't have any of the facts. They're literally going off gut instinct. They don't even try to deny it. They literally say they don't believe the facts. They literally say that they don't. And they cry afoul at the slightest sign of any commentary. This is why it's so frustrating to try to include white people who previously have held conservative viewpoints to have a more open class consciousness, is because y'all a bunch of crybabies about any little thing. It is okay to be able to recognize systems of oppression that might have resulted in you benefiting at the cost of others without losing your mind over it. It's just out there in the world. It's just part of the analysis. If you want to be able to interact with the world, you have to know what's going on in the world. And part of that is the flow and ebb of these forces of oppression. So we're not attacking you when we say that you have privilege. We're literally trying to talk about an issue that you've refused to deal with because you're not looking beyond your feelings if you are a conservative reactionary, that is. All right. Their culture is a death cult. Now, this is one that I hear a little bit more spoken of the right wing, who are very obviously a death cult. But in the past, you would have heard it from, the kind of the original, the OP people for this system that I was talking about, the colonialism, when they were calling other cultures savage while reneging on all their deals and brutally slaughtering or enslaving the other cultures. What's more savage than that, dude? That's the original projection, is literally colonists calling other cultures savage while they literally ravage these other places. That's crazy, bro. Um, yeah. And I put here that it's important to realize that from from supporting the death penalty to legalizing torture, anti-environmental, anti-welfare, and anti-child proposed legislation, the right wing is a death cult. All right, it's always been like that. It's always been like that. All right, they make everything about race. This is the one that's a little bit related to the one that we already talked about with identity politics, but so it'll be short. But it's just specifically like, oh, anytime race comes up, oh, it has to be. No, motherfucker. The whole point of like white privilege, the whole point of being white in the first place, is the lack of racialization. That's the race that I'm saying was invented. That's how it was invented. That some people are racialized, and then some people have a lack of that racialization. The privilege of being white is not having to think about race on a day-to-day basis. So that is the reason why you feel like you never think about it unless somebody brings it up. It's because you have white privilege. Oh my God, I'm getting a little bit heated up in this video, but these attitudes, they piss me off. Please, if you're like this, change. All right, the next one. They're grooming kids. Oof, man. I swear to God, in the real world, when I am talking to people, this is one of the biggest things that drives me up the wall. So many people, so many just working small town people absolutely believe this, that schools are pushing all these trans identities, the litter box thing. It is so freaking frustrating because if you talk to any trans person, you know how even before this Trump administration, how hard it was to get trans healthcare. And then you have these other people saying, "Oh no, they're just forcing the like sex use." No, the only reason why you might feel like your child suddenly became trans is because you're a conservative bigot and they knew they needed to hide it from you until they'd figured more shit out. Okay? And why it's projection? Oh my goodness. So in even older than race, way older than race, is patriarchy. The oppression of women through violence and sexual violence in order to enslave them for the sake of men. Um, so, yeah, this is why the conservatives don't like trans people because their existence kind of disproves that whole thing. Like, if you can be a man who's born as a woman, it screws up their whole fucking ideology that one gender is intrinsically better than the other. That's the reason why they hate trans so much. You haven't put that together until now. So, yeah, so culture, yeah, makes extreme shows of reinforcing binary gender roles that raise girls to be servile, boys to constantly police each other for stepping out of line, and I mean, goodness, guys, the Catholic Church. I mean, even they've acknowledged that there's been like almost 2,000 cover-up cases. I mean, that's bad. That is, come on, that's that's bad. Oof. Okay. Next one. They're trying to take away your freedom. This is the worst conflation that I experience when I'm trying to talk about leftism, especially as an anti authoritarian leftist. If you know the political compass, which is already massively oversimplified, there's two axes, all right? Left, right, and also authoritarian, libertarian. So, yes, you don't have to be a fucking authoritarian to be a leftist. There are authoritarian forms of communism because, surprise, surprise, the bourgeois class is actually really good at maintaining its consolidated power. And so there's a lot of thought out there written, Lenin, Mao, that you need to have these authoritative states in order to make sure that the bourgeoisie is actually stamped out of its power to hold power over people. If you think that you don't like that, probably best to study up on what some of these different ideas are so that you can propose the more libertarian democratic minded forms of leftism because the world is intrinsically needing to move in this direction anyway. We have the dichotomy of, on the one hand, we can actively choose and through peaceful means to live a more sustainable, egalitarian life around the globe, or we are going to climate change and poverty ourselves back into barbarism or into a hitherto unknown level of barbarism. So when those are the two options, you want to be at the table conversing about what types of socialism we're going to be trying to peacefully enact. You know what I'm saying? If you're ignoring the entire field of study, you're not going to be one of the people writing the future, writing the history of the revolution. And then you for sure are going to be at least a little left behind. Thank God the left and the right aren't the same, and that even those authoritarian leftists are going to still make sure that you have food, healthcare, housing, and all this other basic crap that you don't even think matters. God, ugh. Yeah. The idea that the left are trying to take away your freedom when the entire point of being right wing is that it's okay for authority to dominate people and take away their freedom. I mean, it's just it's bizarre. It's bizarre that people can even think that. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's just core world propaganda and people not wanting to wake up from it. All right. I guess I've repeated this one. They're the real racists. All right. I guess this is actually just 21 examples, right? Because we already did this. But I do like this conservatives' denial of their own biases and the systemic nature of racism, projecting their guilt onto others. And I do think there's a little bit of that at play. I also just think there's a lot of anger because, look, conservative ideas are wrong. And if you are going around having wrong ideas and feeling like every time you say your wrong and hateful ideas, people get mad at you and jump down your throat, but you refuse to let go of the wrong, bad, hateful ideas, that's going to make you angry. It will. It will. And it's kind of part of the point too. Like they love the right wing. They love funding misinformation. They love riling people up to the misinformation because they want to keep you locked into that mindset that makes you unhappy. right? I might be unhappy with the state of the world as a leftist. Though as a nihilist, I also know that regardless of what we do, just something happens and then we die and it's fine and it doesn't matter anyway. So I personally am much, much, much happier being able to identify these larger forces, these actual conspiratorial forces at play shaping our world, because that combined with a little bit of personal agency and mental health awareness, basically how you live a good life, in my opinion. All right, let's keep going. They're so sensitive, always getting triggered. How many people do you, how many people do you think leaving angry comments right now got to this point? If you're leaving an angry comment right now, let me know that you got to the triggered comment, just so that I at least know that you engaged with this. All right, because I swear. And one other thing that I just want to say that has always bothered me about the triggered thing. So, triggered is a term from psychology that refers to people who have PTSD, and there's a specific thing that because their brain in the punishment reward system has told them from a traumatic experience, if this one thing that relates to that traumatic experience exists, you need to hyperflight. You want to seriously avoid that. That's why that happens, and it's because of people who've been through like trauma and abuse. So when people just get offended, when you just upset somebody with your ideas, I mean that's like a different thing. But to the extent that we're calling that getting triggered, bro, I think we know who the real getting triggered crowd is. Man. All right. They're intolerant of any different ideas. I love this one because so many people in my comments have been like, you need to be like, you liberals need to be like more tolerant of different people's ideas and not just have an echo chamber. Meanwhile, like, that's what all the conservative comments are saying. And it's just like, I'm glad you found my video, to be honest. I'm kind of glad in a way that my videos aren't intrinsically finding a left-wing audience, because that isn't as good. The echo chamber isn't as good. We should be conversing. You need to learn about the ideas that are very interesting and out there and true and are hidden from you, except if you do a little digging, and that's what I'm trying to help you with. But at the same time, I need to learn how to better present that idea. And I'm just a normal dude, right? I'm not even a professional politics guy. Politics. You ever heard that joke? Anyway, I think we're almost done. They're stuck in an echo chamber. All right, we kind of covered this. All right. 20, 20. I went a little over because I wanted to make sure to get at least 20. All right, they're bad with the economy. I love this one too, because you always hear conservatives saying, leftists don't know how to budget, leftists are bad with the economy. Du, 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 du. Meanwhile, if you actually just look at the graphs, I mean, the last time the US had a budget surplus was under a Democrat. It was at the end of the Clinton administration. And despite Obama's best, and I don't like Obama, just so you know, I don't think Obama's been good for the world. Scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds applies so much to Obama. But at the same time, y'all hating Obama back then, that was hella racist and way overboard. And also, Obama had pretty just normal kind of common sense Democrat economic policies that made the first Trump years feel good. Like that's why you remember them that way. Hate to say it. But yeah, we've had Bush and Trump totally tank our economy, totally tank the deficit. They increase spending. Trump's just increased the deficit like $4.6 trillion. They're lying to you about it. They just want to cut welfare because then they can keep more tax breaks for themselves. It's the most out in the open conspiracy. It's not even a conspiracy theory. They just literally are conspiring to do it. They say they're doing it, and then do it. All right. Now, by comparison, leftists who, and again, leftists are not ideological. Like I was not brought into leftism until I had made certain core axiomatic shifts in my own mind, where I realized, for example, that it is socialism or barbarism. That is the inevitability. It's math. It's basic math. It's basic physics of entropy, right? Um, and so, like Sherlock Holmes says, once you've gotten rid of the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I've always had a little bit of a problem with this because it's like, how do you know you've accounted for all the options? But if you're stuck between feeling like, on the one hand, the world can never get along, which is, I think, I say it sneeringly, but that is like the genuine conservative belief. But on the other hand, it's socialism or barbarism. So if you're not going for socialism, you're going for barbarism. So like, it might be improbable, but it's what's left is figuring out how to make that work. That's my point. Anyway, leftists are typically people who are actually looking at numbers, actually looking at systems dynamics, actually looking at how um, investments and rate of returns for the society at large and not just private interests are going to be met. So yeah, they're way better economists. Economists. All right. This might be oh my god. They ruined comedy. Bruh. I love this. So many bad comedians are just like, I'm conservative, and that's why people don't like my bad comedy. And it's like, conservatives have never been funny. Why is it funny to reinforce the status quo? That's not funny. That's as serious as it gets. Again, this is just a definitional thing. Pushing boundaries is funny. Saying something absurd is funny. Juxtaposing different ideas that you hadn't thought of and normally don't fit together, except in this one specific way that the comedian was able to string it all together, is comedy. The right's never been good at that. So how did the left ruin it? The left's the only one who's ever really been doing it. And before you come at me with the Awaken with JP, you guys know he's a grifter, and he knows all the things I'm saying too. He just lies to you about it. So that's the only reason he can be funny. All right, they're just looking for handouts. Guys, my God, I'm so tired. I don't even have the energy to like yell about this one, but you just hear about it like, oh, leftists, they want everyone to just get it. Okay, what about the handout from your rich parents? What about the handout from the scholarships that were merit-based, but you got because you were raised rich and hence had better merit to present at that critical age where you're getting offered that merit-based scholarship? Is it getting handed something when you're a company who just gets bailed out by the government? All right, there's this expression, privatize profits, socialize losses. That's what America's done for the last 50 years. That's where your money's gone. The internet was invented over a decades-long project that was funded at a loss, at least initially, by the US government, by the taxpayer. And then as soon as they got it up and running, oh, private interests. We should own the internet. Like, it was stolen from us by private interests. It was. That's just a fact. That's how it happened. Oh, and I also think about this quote all the time. It's attributed to MLK, but maybe he didn't come up with it. But America has always had socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. And that just gets truer with time. They want violence, the way you hear it. Leftists, they're like, oh, they're rioting, they're destroying the Teslas, they're terrorists, whatever. Why is projection? Conservatives love violence. Like, I swear to God, like every single time there's a mass shooter, it's a fucking disenfranchised white guy who'd gone down a right-wing rabbit hole online. The left doesn't do stochastic terrorism to vent their frustration with the system and kill innocent victims. We wallow. Okay. There's a difference. Not to mention, there's such a thing as systemic violence. Like if you legislate like speeding, going faster results in more car crashes. So when they signed legislation that raised the highway speeds back up from 55, that killed people. That pen stroke killed people. This is just part of it. There's always going to be some amount of systemic violence, structural violence, ideally very little, and it's constantly being worked on. But we just have tons that we're okay with. We're okay with police brutality. We're okay with people being denied health care and then dying or having worse quality of life, dying sooner as a result. I mean, there's just so many aspects of our American capitalist system that might not have the CEOs being the ones to pull the trigger, but people are dying, and also lots more people than you can kill with a gun. So trolley problem your way out of that. They're just angry. We kind of addressed this before, but like, I'm not angry. I'm way past that. I I could have lived, or at least, and all of us could have, in a time where ours and the people around us's talents, motivations, ambitions, goals, and dreams were able to be realized. Um, where you could just trust that the people that you went to school with are also doing okay, doing interesting things, that you don't have to visit a city and then just interact with service workers who are stressed out of their goddamn minds, and not be able to like just share and culture with. I mean, that sucks. I'm not angry because of that. Like, it just sucks, right? But it's definitely projection because conservatives will get very angry. We mentioned the violence. There's also just the patriarchal idea that anger is the only emotion that like men can show. And most, well, not most, but a lot of conservatives are men. I mean, simple majority, I'm sure, um, but yeah, again, like I said before, stubbornly holding on to the ideas that are making you unhappy is gonna make you angry because like I've struggled with anger. My family rages, and my parents did it a lot better than their parents did, sort of situation, right? But for me, it was always like whenever I did snap at someone, and I've mostly worked that out of my system now, but it was always because I was letting things build up. And then I snapped at the person. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back sort of thing. But it was like maybe 2 years or a lifetime of frustration over that issue, right? So that's not good. How do I get over that now? Simple. Cognitive behavioral therapy, recognizing my feelings in the moment, trusting as a certain axiomatic fact that I will always prefer the reaction tamer kept. Um, I'm obviously still going to, speak up, obviously get in there with the comments, trying to actually go over the ideas and stuff. But um, but I try to do it with an uplifting, positive sort of vibe about it, right? Because I do want you to get it. Like, there's something I get. It's become so obvious to me over the years as I've continued to learn more about it that I feel like as a side project, I can do some amount of just explaining this shit. So I want you to get it. I think there's something to get. And what you do with that is your own. It's different. You can do what you want with the awareness. You just have to have that in the first place, right? It's okay that different people are different. I believe that more than anybody, right? As a left wing person, or should. They're in a cult. All right, this one, I'm not going to get too into it. I don't want to get totally slammed on the religious front, but you guys know that the right wing is far more likely to get sucked into cults, cults of personality. MAGA's definitely cult vibes. We're not going to linger on this one too long. They ignore common sense. This one's a really kind of sad one because, and I also have to distinguish here that um, conservative politicians ignore common sense. Conservative voters are usually, and this is where leftists and like individualist conservative types can really come together because we both are fundamentally concerned with our material realities. I think what benefits in having the left wing perspective is viewing the overall system, the more complicated web of interactions between uh, things. I mean, the idea of dialectical materialism as opposed to just straight materialism is that there's a feedback loop with ideas as humans try to imprint on the world, but are met with the world, right? And as that process goes over through history, that's the historical materialism. So um, we understand processes, we understand like a way of kind of describing this stuff in a way that's not just, the immigrants are out to get you and the corporations aren't, which is obviously retarded. um, they don't care about you or your children. I'm not going to linger on this one either. Like so many, this is a systemic violence all over again. Whether it's uh, not wanting to pay for kids' lunches, not wanting to pay for every kid to have a good education, uh, childhood agency like being completely like stripped, pretty much. I mean, yeah. Conservatives don't care about your children at all. The only reason that you could ever think that they do is simply if you just think that you'll always be rich enough to be able to take care of your kids. That's all they can pitch to you. But they hate your children. They're just numbers to them. They'd love to have their money. And if they can't have that, then they'll take their labor. Um, God, so much projection, dude. The idea that left-wing people don't care about the children or the future, that's what I mean, it is backwards because you'd think conserving, you want to conserve that. I mean, that's how people get pulled into this idea of like how important like the traditional family is, but that's a twisted idea, right? That's like it's the idea of how a family is supposed to be, as opposed to looking at the various realities of how families are. Um, Humans might be complex, but we're studyable. And it's possible to study animals and then know like what they need socially and like dietarily and in their environment and cognitively and sleep. And I mean, we should know that. And from systems dynamics, we know that there are positive and negative feedback loops. So investing in people having the right level of everything that they need to be living their good life means they're living a more productive life. You don't have to spend more to get their happiness. They're able to get their happiness. And they're also able to be overall more productive. So the society as a whole is more active. The economy is more active. Yeah, there aren't going to be a small number of people hoarding all the wealth. That's that's the one that's the one or the other. That's the one or the other in the first place. It is a zero sum game if it's done like that. It's not a zero sum game if we're willing to invest in things that benefit from economies of scale and are cheaper per individual by pooling together. But that's decided also through the combination of deserved authority, through the scientific method and stuff like that, and also simply incorporating more democratic aspects, especially across different age levels. Um, yeah, I kind of went off with there. But I wrote, why it's projection. This reveals conservative adherence to their own beliefs, often dismissing evidence and logic that contradicts their views, whether it's common sense gun reform, single payer affordable health care, or the long term consequences of understanding climate change. They're ignoring common sense. Okay, whatever. They run a secret cabal trying to take over the world. Yeah, this isn't a freaking. It's not a conspiracy theory when it comes to the right doing this, right? It's not a leftist cabal. It's not a single billionaire George Soros. So frustrating, dude. Look, read. Why is projection? I looked it up. There's about 2,500 billionaires worldwide. All right, 2,500 people, right? That's like a large high school or something, like an inner city high school, perhaps. That's the secret cabal. That's it. That's the secret cabal. And they fund propaganda or outright political destabilization in order to control commerce, government, and crucially, your freedom. I think the conspiracy theorists, in a way, would almost prefer the impossibly nefarious, like, conspiracy theory conspiracies that they believe. Because, on the one hand, getting rid of billionaires is like maybe an unsexy solution, just in the fact that it's like it feels kind of obvious, but at the same time it's like it's just so obvious. They're not even happy. There is no benefit, and everybody's labor is contributing to the reason why that wealth exists in the first place. So anyway, it's very frustrating. Very frustrating. Once you start to see the forest for the trees, I do believe the world becomes a little bit less complex or less just confusing and disorienting because you actually start to build a paradigm. You actually start to recognize, and this is why I wanted to go through so many examples of this because once you start to see the pattern, it'll help you avoid the propaganda. When you hear a conservative politician make an accusation against left wing this, liberal that, whatever, your gut reaction should be, now what are they doing that's just like that? Probably also double check facts and shit. and not just hear the story. Okay. Finally, we got to the end. I don't even know how long this video is. I thought it was going to be like a 20-minute video, but it certainly feels like I was recording for longer than that. But hope you guys had fun. I said this was going to be a fun video. I certainly got into it. Woo! Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe. Let me know what I did wrong in the comments. Let me know how my face offends you. But if you did make it to the end, I love you for that. And I'll see you next time. Remember, it's just a thought. And y'all leave yours in the comments below. Have a nice day.